One collector spent over a decade buying LEGO sets they never planned to sell. In 2024, they finally let go of all of it. What sold that day rewrote what people thought plastic bricks could be worth. But the story doesn't start with the record. It starts with the set. Nobody was watching. $479 changed hands for a set that once sold for well under $100 brand new on a regular toy store shelf. Market Street was the second entry in LEGO's modular building series, and it has spent its entire existence in the shadow of the sets that came before and after it. Curved staircases wind up through the middle of the building. The floors separate and interchange, so no two builders end up with quite the same arrangement. It's a clever build, aimed at adults, but a quiet one. Nothing about it screamed collectible the way later releases would. That quietness turned out to be the whole story. Collectors stockpiled the flashier modular buildings by instinct, buying doubles and triples the moment each one launched, treating them like they already knew what would happen to the price. Market Street never got that treatment. Nobody was watching closely enough to hoard it. Fewer sealed boxes survived as a result, and fewer buyers were competing for the ones that did. Prices don't need a famous name attached to climb. They just need scarcity that nobody engineered on purpose. Nobody sets out to make the overlooked thing valuable. It just happens when everyone else is busy looking somewhere shinier. Why would a private buyer hand over more than $1,000 for a plastic tower barely taller than a person? Because the tower was never really the point. LEGO's version uses more than 3,000 pieces to recreate the same lattice logic that real 19th century engineers spent years solving in wrought iron. Every crossing beam, every tapering section toward the top, follows the same structural pattern as the original in Paris, just scaled down to something you could carry under one arm. Collectors weren't paying for height. They were paying for the fact that a toy company had taken an actual feat of structural engineering and made it buildable on a living room floor, using nothing but interlocking plastic. That's a strange thing to put a price on, but people did it anyway. At auction, that shrunken feat of engineering sold for $1,151, still sealed in its original packaging, never even opened to check if all the pieces were inside. Buildings are one kind of obsession. Symbols of a country are a different one entirely, and the next set on this list proves just how different. It launched to indifference. Stores discounted LEGO's Statue of Liberty just to clear it off the shelves, because almost nobody was rushing to buy a plastic monument built mostly out of sand green plastic. Years later, a sealed copy of that exact unwanted set sold at auction for $2,174. Nearly 3,000 pieces went into it, standing well over 2 feet tall once assembled. The set went from clearance bin to trophy case without a single retailer predicting the reversal. Somewhere out there, a store manager who slashed the price years ago just to move inventory has no idea what that same box would fetch today. Part of what happened here is simple math. A set that didn't sell well new means fewer units in circulation, and fewer units means fewer sealed survivors decades later. But part of it is something harder to explain. Sometimes a design that looks unremarkable on a shelf looks completely different once it's the only one left. That kind of reversal isn't rare on this list. It's basically the rule. And the next set proves it wasn't a fluke. 2 bidders want the same box. Only one of them gets to keep it. That's the entire tension behind Cafe Corner, the set that started LEGO's modular building line before anyone at the company knew it would become a line at all. 3 floors rise up from a corner storefront. A mosaic tile pattern runs along the front wall. A tiny bicycle leans against the building like someone just stepped inside for a coffee and forgot to lock it up. None of that on paper explains $2,257 changing hands for it. What explains it is that Cafe Corner came first. When a whole category of collecting takes off, the object that started it doesn't get replaced in people's minds, no matter how many better versions come along afterward. It gets chased instead for years by anyone who wants to own the exact point where something began. Every modular building that followed owes this one a debt it can never fully repay. And several of those descendants have already gone on to outprice the original that inspired them. This is the one on the list that actually moves. Wired for electricity, the Grand Carousel spins and plays music when it's switched on, carrying 9 minifigures around through a build of more than 3,000 pieces. $2,311 for a carnival ride made of plastic sounds. At first, like collectors losing all sense of perspective. Then you consider what happens to motorized sets over time. Motors seize up. Wiring corrodes. Batteries left inside for a decade can leak and damage everything around them. Very few of these survive both sealed and fully functional, and a buyer at that point isn't just purchasing a toy. They're purchasing one of the rare ones that still actually works the way it did the day it left the factory. There's something almost theatrical about the idea of a fairground ride sitting untouched inside a box for 15 years, waiting for someone to finally plug it in and watch it spin exactly once more. A carnival ride commanding 4 figures is already strange enough. What happens when the subject stops being a fairground and becomes an entire battle station is a different kind of math altogether. One fan held onto a sealed Death Star 2 for years, hoping to sell it and put the money toward a first house. There were no buyers willing to meet the price they wanted, so the box went back into a closet instead, still wrapped, still waiting, while the house search moved on without it. That story spread through LEGO forums because it captured something collectors don't like to admit out loud. Rarity alone guarantees nothing. A set can be old, complete, and genuinely scarce, and it can still sit unsold for years if the market simply isn't ready to pay what the owner believes it's worth. Eventually, somewhere else entirely, a different sealed Death Star 2 did sell, for $2,735. Same set. Same sealed condition. A completely different buyer, at a completely different moment, walked away with a completely different outcome than the fan who couldn't find one. The box itself never changes. The timing does. And in a hobby built entirely around waiting for the right moment, timing is about to matter even more than it already has. This Ultimate Collector Series ship launched at $269. At auction, a sealed copy went for $2,857, more than 10 times its original price tag. That's not the slow, steady drift upward that most retired sets experience over the years. That's a set outrunning its own price completely. Star Wars collectors have a reputation for paying a premium just because of the name printed on the box, and there's truth to that reputation. But this particular set earns its markup honestly, through scale, through the level of surface detail packed into every panel, and through a production run that ended years ago and was never brought back. Nostalgia alone doesn't make a toy multiply in value tenfold. Something has to actually be scarce behind the nostalgia, or the math simply doesn't work. And genuine scarcity is about to get a lot more literal because the next set was, for a time, the single biggest thing LEGO had ever built. For years, this held the title of the largest LEGO set the company had ever released. Nearly 6,000 pieces went into recreating one of the most photographed buildings on Earth, dome by dome, archway by archway. Size alone doesn't explain $3,058 at auction. Bigger sets, before and since, have sold for far less than that. What explains it is a production run that ended while demand was still climbing rather than falling. Fans who missed their window were left with nowhere to go except the secondary market, and the secondary market, as every set on this list keeps proving, does not hand out discounts to people who wait too long to decide. There's an odd fairness to it, in a way. The set didn't become valuable because LEGO made too few by accident. It became valuable because they stopped making it right when everyone finally wanted one. Everything on this list so far has been about buildings, carousels, ships that never once left the ground. What comes next actually flew on screen decades before most of these collectors were even born. Remember the collector from the very beginning of this list. In 2024, that private collection finally went up for sale in full. Nearly every Star Wars set released between 2004 and 2018, bought quietly over more than a decade by one person who never intended to get rich off any of it. They just kept buying what they loved year after year without a plan beyond that. Inside that collection sat a sealed Millennium Falcon, the 2007 Ultimate Collector Series release. More than 5,000 pieces. 5 minifigures. Still shrink-wrapped after almost 2 decades of sitting completely untouched, through moves, through years, through however many times its owner must have been tempted to finally break the seal and build it. It sold for $5,301. That number should have been the headline of the entire auction on its own. It wasn't. It wasn't even the most expensive Star Wars set the same collector was letting go of that day. The same 2024 sale saved its real fireworks for one single lot. A sealed copy of Cloud City built around Bespin's floating mining colony from 2003, carrying minifigures that don't turn up cheaply anywhere else in the LEGO catalog. A Lando Calrissian dressed in his Bespin outfit, a matching Princess Leia, a uniquely decaled Boba Fett different from the version included in any other set the company has ever released. Auctioneers expected the lot to close somewhere around $4,000. The bidding didn't stop there, it kept climbing. Past the estimate, past what anyone in the room seemed to expect, until it finally closed at £4,655, close to $6,000. That made it the single most valuable item in the entire collection. Ahead of the Falcon. Ahead of every other set, the same private owner had spent a decade quietly assembling one purchase at a time. That collector never set out to build a fortune. There was no strategy, no spreadsheet tracking resale values, no plan to cash out someday. They just kept buying what they loved, and they kept refusing to open the boxes. When it finally came time to let go, the market didn't just set a price. It answered a question that collector never thought to ask, about what all of those years of restraint had actually been worth the entire time. None of these people were investors when they started. They were just fans who couldn't bring themselves to break the seal. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do with something you love is absolutely nothing at all.